Sorry.
Doing what we're doing now, and I think some of us outline what we do now, and then how do we streamline this process to get something done faster than we've been doing in the past. One of the things that we have done is that the last convention or the one before, we said that it was okay to do dishes.
Yeah.
That we could adopt program every year. Previously, it was every other year. So that moves things along more quickly. I think one of the things that we need to think about is what is something that we haven't ever touched before, and we need to really start from the beginning. And I think cybersecurity is probably one of those. In that we need to gather some information, and we can't just pick up organs for concurrence, because we haven't looked at it enough. And we're not agreeing with them anyhow. But if we, but for something, and I can't think of something right off the top of my head, but I don't know, I can't think of something, but something that yeah, Beth?
Go ahead. I didn't mean for you to stop mid-sentence.
Okay. Well, for something that we have sort of taken positions on, but don't have anything explicit in our position book, we could gather the items that we were taking positions on, using for positions, put them together, and then get a concurrence on that. And that would streamline some of what we do.
Tony, I did not follow the last sentence. I am very
I
sorry. My little brain just didn't keep up with you.
So if for example, we're doing something on,
how about the example that I can remember was when I was trying to do something on police reform.
Yeah,
and you
okay.
didn't have a position on police reform, but I was able to use one of our principles that said that we follow the Constitution and all the rights that are delineated in the Constitution, and that included police reform. So we used that in order to, this is when I was in LAC, use that in order to back some of the bills that were about police reform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we scoured the program book to see which which positions we could use for that. We kind of on the edge used what we did without really having a explicit position on that. If we were to need or want an explicit position, then we could put these all together and say, okay, we already have positions on all these other things, and this agrees with what we want to do, coming at it back. And we could do concurrence at the next annual meeting.
And in some ways, particularly for the cybersecurity around elections, we could use some of our positions on elections.
Right.
To back that kind of action.
Yes.
Without having a whole new thing. To write a very specific position on cybersecurity in elections, I think would take a whole lot of research and pulling in a lot of expertise. And we always try to keep things as vague as possible in the positions.
Gene, we
so that we can spread it out.
Yeah, so we're working on cybersecurity, and Oregon, just as background,
Mhm.
Oregon studied cybersecurity for about 3 years.
Right.
But they want to come to national and have concurrence with their position.
Right.
We have a group of about 3-4 people who know something about cybersecurity, and one of them knows a great deal about it. And we looked over the Oregon material, and we disagree with some of the things they're doing.
Right.
And so we're trying to get them to sit down with us and come out with a compromise so that we can support their concurrence. But if we can't do that, we're developing our own.
Right.
And we're basing it on, maybe there's some kernels of information here, but we're basing it on what their study is, what other things we know, and putting that together. And we could do a concurrence in Colorado on that. And it's a shorter study, but we've used a lot of material from a lot of different places.
Yes. Yes. I see that. And I think the question becomes are there two questions here? Maybe there are three. In other words, we've got no stated policy about how we go about it. That's one of our things to fix. The other is that we have something that has a time element to it. We have to submit it do we have to submit that by 3 months ahead? Or if we have a change?
I can't remember.
I'm sorry, Barb, explain a little bit more about that question.
If we are proposing a change in an amendment to Oregon's proposed position that they're bringing to national, do we have to submit our change 3 months ahead? In other words, what's our stated timeline?
We haven't definitively answered that question, but we have told Oregon that we're not going to support their concurrence the way it is.
Okay.
If we wanted to submit to national a counter proposal, yes, we would have to follow the timelines that national has. I'm wondering if we shouldn't just decide what we want to do in Colorado and forget about national.
And simply make it a Colorado position?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But Tony,
But set up in Colorado the way that we want to do it, and streamlining it, and maybe as states are the incubators for new ideas, supposedly, we could do what we want to do and then submit that to national and say, we think this is a much better way to go about this.
Now, are you talking about streamlining the way this is done, or are you talking about the election security specifically?
I'm talking about streamlining the way that we have done things.
Okay.
I'm trying to get generically to what we really want to do, and I'm just using cybersecurity as an example.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
isn't it?
I'm not sure that we are able to streamline what national does.
Or local leagues. I mean, if the LWVCO board, or LWVCO membership adopts a new study at annual meeting, that group goes off, and if they take 4 years, what are we going to do? I mean, we might be able to complain, but in my mind, that would be very top heavy as opposed to grassroots.
Ed, how can this
We could,
organization continue to be vibrant and and move forward if we have become so bogged down in getting anything done.
Well, yeah,
It's a
and
long time.
Karen, I'm sorry. Karen, I totally agree with you.
I know.
But there are things that we could do that could be much shorter because we've already studied them to some degree, or there's enough material out there that we could put things together fairly quickly, or it's pretty close to things that we've already done. So
But that's us.
I think
That's not other groups.
I'm just talking about Colorado, about Beth, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you mean.
I mean, yes, I agree, Tony, that
You just muted yourself.
yep. Sorry, does everybody know that space bar is another way to unmute yourself?
Really?
Hitting your space bar?
No.
So, yeah. So I was doing that, and then I was watching my cursor move across the whiteboard here. Sorry. I mean, we can, in my mind, and I haven't been through a study, so I am speaking solely in theory. I mean, we've already streamlined by allowing acceptance of new studies and concurrence of new positions to happen annually instead of, every other year. But and I think that we should absolutely make suggestions to our local leagues about what you were saying, Tony, which is absolutely correct, that we have broad program or positions that could be mushed together to create the basis, the foundation of another position like the police reform one or some such. But in my mind, we can't mandate how long a local league takes to study a new position.
I think
when there's if a new study is adopted at our annual meeting, the LWVCO established the committee. So it's under our auspices
Right.
that the study is done.
Right.
Not every league does it.
Yeah, I understand. But say Larimer comes to us, through our program planning process and says they want to create a new position on, I don't know what, on free trade coffee. I mean, I just obviously pulled that out of the air because that's what I have. And we say, yes, that's a good idea. That is a gap in our positions. It's not Larimer that moves ahead on that study. It's somehow LWVCO.
Well, they come to us and no, okay. So they suggest that at program planning time.
Right.
The board looks it over and says, yeah, we think that would be fine. And then the board approves the study happening. And then it becomes the LWVCO study, not Larimer's study. If Larimer were to do a study of their school board only, then they can do what they want to do. They don't have to come to us.
Okay. But
I'm going to go.
Came to us, my understanding is if they came to us about that, then we would have to take it to annual meeting, get approval from everybody, assign a committee to study it. We would probably assign Larimer County since they brought it and they're interested. And then they would bring it back when they've got the study done.
Right.
We would then send it to all of the local leagues with questions.
Yeah, and discussion.
Discuss and come to consensus on. And then we would gather all of that information and bring that to the next annual meeting where it would be approved for the whole state.
Yeah. And that's why it takes a while.
When we did the mental health one,
yeah,
was more time spent with the process of getting it through the state approval thing, or with it seems to me we did more time on the research and writing up the proposal than we did
Right.
putting it through. But you tell me, because I don't remember.
I think we spent a good year on the research.
Right.
And I'm thinking back on how we had to do that. I think technology has moved forward since then, but whether local leagues have access to all of that technology and members have access is a good question. What happened was that there was the Aurora school shooting. There was a whole, that was just before program planning. Leagues submitted ideas for studies at that time. Gun control was huge. And the other kind of merging element was mental health, mental illness. And so we wanted to, the board decided to form a committee to go ahead and look at basically whether there was a merger there on those two issues, because they were so highly ranked in leagues' requests for study. Nothing came to the fore that year as a single issue, but those two were highly ranked. So in other words, there wasn't something that just gave us license to say, oh my gosh, we're going to study fracking, as it had several years before. We researched, we pulled together our report to the board, and then the board said, okay, well, let's send this out to all the leagues and get buy-in for this. And are we going to develop a position from that? Do we need a position? We recommended in our committee that had done the initial work that there be a position that was broader than the league's current healthcare position. I guess I have to say more specific, that brought behavioral health in rather than just saying healthcare. And so we wanted to incorporate behavioral health, which includes mental health and substance use. And we thought that that was important to talk about. We went to the convention after, Jean. We spent a good 6 months, 8 months going to local leagues and sending this out, as has Oregon now in their request for agreement on their position.
I mean, have you finished, Barb?
Yeah, you go ahead, because I can elaborate.
Well, I was thinking of the study that I worked on higher education in the mid-90s, and that was a traditional study. So people suggested that we study higher education. A committee was formed. The committee studied higher education, various facets of it. They narrowed it down. They did what the committee thought was necessary to do. They did the questions, and then those questions were sent out to local leagues. Local leagues responded. The responses came back to the committee. The committee put all the different responses together and developed positions for higher education. Now, I do that, and the behavioral health is another example that there are topics that we have not touched before that we don't know very much about as the league. And it's my opinion that we need to keep the old system, or at least most of it, going out to the local leagues because, as I said, first of all, I think we're a grassroots organization.
We are.
We need to keep that aspect. So for those traditional kinds of studies, we continue pretty much doing it the way we have been doing. I think the rub comes when there's something that we know quite a bit about, We've been taking some sort of positions on it. Why do we need a whole study to do something else? So I think we need to figure out how we streamline that particular path for getting to positions.
I think that's the crux of it right there, Tony, is that there's a big difference between something where there has not been a lot of study and research done. We're talking right now specifically about election security. We know a lot about that. LWV US has taken up a position on some aspects of that. Colorado has been very successful with their system over, almost a decade of doing this. We have people who are really knowledgeable about, the pitfalls of using internet and some of these kinds of things. So it's not like we're going into that particular area without a whole lot of information. So how do we streamline that process? How do we do something in such a way? I think part of the issue here is that we've spoken with Oregon. They've spent an awful lot of time on election security and cybersecurity and privacy. They don't want to delay it any longer. And yet we believe that they're getting ready to submit something at the national level that we don't think, particularly in the area of election security, is as comprehensive as it needs to be. So can we fast track that with the knowledge and the information that we have without slowing down the process? Because Oregon's concern is that we don't want to wait another 3 years to have something, adopted at the national level. And I don't think Colorado does either. But we seem to be bogged down in this whole how we do things. So that's I think that's what it is in this particular case.
Is there something that a resource group could gather to present to Colorado's members that summarizes, gives links to, etc., so that people are informed in Colorado of why and what we want to bring?
Yes, I would say, Maud, Tony, I think we already have that. Do you feel, is that an accurate statement?
I believe so. I think we have a lot of it. You're still going to, I guess you're going to need a group who culls through that information and sends it out the most succinct information. But again, it could be done. Do we necessarily need to adopt a study at the annual meeting to do something, to come up with a position?
Well, doesn't the whole membership need to approve it?
Well, that's where we are now, but do we?
Okay.
I think that it is important, because we are a grassroots organization, to have the memberships buy in so that nobody feels that they've been blindsided by what the Colorado League is doing.
So why does it have to be at the annual meeting? Why can't we call a special, especially now that we're doing everything on Zoom, a special meeting of the membership?
Right. Is that a good way?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
I'm sorry.
Can we
say that XYZ local league has come up with this that we think really applies to everybody, and we would like you to give input on it? I don't know. We might have to change bylaws once again in order to do that, but I think in the interim we could just go ahead and do it and then change the bylaws at the next annual meeting.
And I think it would just be adding a really simple few words. Just like the board gave ourselves the ability to vote by email or by electronic means, whether that means Zoom or email, we'd just be putting that little few words in. So I think that would be simple.
One of the things might be to actually put down then the steps that the process entails now, and then see what the process needs to become, and be sure that everybody is aware of that. I don't know. I think good transparency on that stuff is really important.
Mhm. Well, let me ask you something. Okay, if a study can be adopted outside of an annual meeting at a special meeting of the membership, can a position be adopted in the same way? Or should that still only happen at annual meetings?
Well, I think we'd like it to be happening in that same way, but at the present time, I think you have to get some buy-in for that.
Well, I
Well,
always thought,
you know,
I thought it was kind of redundant to have it. What we did before was, and what we're supposed to be doing now, is we send it to all the local leagues with questions, and we ask them to come to consensus on their answers to those questions. And then they send that back to the state, and the state board, I think, looks at all of that and decides whether there is consensus from the local leagues on these different questions about this issue. We all mostly agree. And if we do, then they bring it to, at that time, convention for actual approval. But when they've actually pulled all that together, you've got approval. I mean, that is the approval you're looking for, is
Right.
that all the local leagues have come to consensus on it. So we
Right.
should do that. And that would be your grassroots agreement with whatever position on whatever issue we're talking about.
So if we were to do something like we did with the police reform, and we were to say, here are the positions we use, and send it and tell the local leagues that we would like to pull this all together and have a position that says this, so that it's clearer to us and what we can work on. Then we send it out to the local leagues and ask them if they like this, and then adopt it if we like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If, you know, 93% of the leagues come back and say yes, then that means the state has said yes. We don't have to wait for your annual meeting to have them come back and say yes again.
So it makes it faster for the things that we already pretty much know what we want to do and what we have positions on, or we as an organization have studied to some degree behind the scenes. Pulling that all together, and we don't need to do a 3-year study.
Yes, I think, however, it would be.
We do, and on some things we don't. I think the study part of it should be left open. There's no time there, because sometimes we don't have any real idea of what we want to do, and we need to study it. And other times we know what we want, and we can.
That's why there should be 2 paths.
Let me ask you this, Tony.
Something in between.
When we send this out, can we ask when it's sent out that leagues act on this rapidly as opposed to?
Yeah, always do that. That's
okay.
I think the other thing is
I'm sorry, Bart,
yeah.
Going back to the time of not being able to mandate a local league. The local league, if they're doing a local study, no, we can't mandate, but we could put a time limit on a study that we have approved at the state level. We could say, we want this back to us in a year.
Well, or we can send it out to, when we send the position that we're looking at out to the leagues and ask them to comment on it, we can say 60 days.
Right.
Yeah, I think what we need to do first is to kind of give them a heads up and say, here's what we are seeing, and here's where the world is now, basically. We've got to move faster on a number of items, and so we are going to be asking you to do X, Y, Z. And that gives them a heads up that something is coming, not simply to just ask for action when they haven't been doing that before.
Right.
But
I'm saying 60 days because if we send them the background information and the questions that we're going to be asking, I'm thinking they can take one of their monthly meetings to discuss the background information and the next one to answer the questions, and then get it back to the staff at state.
It'd be like 60 days or less.
mhm. Well, it just seems to me that, I mean, a lot of the bogging down was around the convention issue. And while we've removed that with annual meeting, I mean, the whole point is that the league wanted to get together in person to discuss this, right? It was all about being in person. And now that more and more we're, we will always be using technology to allow our statewide voices to be better heard. Yeah, let's just do away with those timelines, and we just call special member meetings when a study is proposed and when a position is proposed. And hopefully they'll align with our annual meeting. That would be cool. But if it doesn't need to stop us or make us wait.
Mm-hmm. And I think be sure we justify, why.
Yeah.
Be sure we justify why. So it doesn't look like something that's just being imposed by the state board on local leagues. That's impossible.
And why do you think they would feel imposed, Barb?
That's because they have always felt.
Okay.
It's a traditional thing.
Okay.
They're trying to tell us what to do.
Yeah,
but
it's changing a bit, and because there is more communication through electronic means, and
right.
It's that the whole thing is softened a bit about it, but that is why, because they want to say something about things.
Well, but in my mind, we're making things easier and more flexible.
You're going to get some pushback.
Be sure we communicate effectively why we're going to be sending to them, because I think that is a really can be a sore point with some leagues.
Karen, you had something to say.
Well, I guess the justification is that it allows us to be, by being a bit more flexible, it allows us to be more responsive, or more timely, if you will, and
more nimble.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so, I would suspect, I would hope that all local leagues, we, obviously, because we are grassroots, we want that input, but we also, I would hope that the local leagues feel the same way that we do at the state level, that being timely and getting things done quickly is really to our advantage here, because it allows us then to have an impact when we can, rather than having something bogged down to the point where, shoot, by the time we get our ducks in a row, somebody else has already done it.
Well,
yes,
also we're becoming a new league, and we want to be in more places, more time.
Yes, we want our voice to really matter.
right.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon sent out their timeline and they didn't study for 3 years. The process took 3 years, and some of it, as Beth said, was the meeting, the annual meeting, or the
waiting
convention. Yeah, the waiting, and the actual study was a few months, and everything else in the process waiting and sending things out for consensus and getting things back. It just all of that took of
A long time.
is what took 3 years.
Well,
Are there any
either when
other,
we did the mental health thing, Barb, you tell me, but I think that we had to go to state and then we had to wait till the next year to go to
that's right,
national
right,
because they were too close together and we couldn't
Right.
meet the 3-month timeline after our convention to get to theirs.
that's
But
right.
you used that year to lobby, right?
We did. We did. We figured we had 9 months to lobby once we got our ducks in a row.
Well, I'm wondering on some issues like the election security issue, for example, is the lobbying going to take as long as it might as long as it might in other issues? Because I suspect that probably most local leagues pretty much are on board with the idea that there are certain things that need to be done. We've used them in our own state system. They've worked effectively. We know they work. There is really good data that indicates that there are certain things that you want to do and certain things you don't. So it's the research is already there.
Well,
Yep.
and I think there's a higher level of base knowledge
Yes.
about election security than there might have been about behavioral health.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, Oregon has already sent out a couple of months ago, I think by now, sent out to all state league leaders a link to their position, and they've gotten a lot of feedback on it. I think not all of it positive. And so this issue has already been in the minds of some league leaders. To recap just a little bit, what I'm hearing is that we're thinking that we should have a 2-track system for adopting positions. One is the traditional, the annual meeting approves the board recommends a study, the annual meeting approves a study, the league LWBCO appoints a study committee, it does its study, they send questions out to local leagues send it back, the committee writes a position, it goes to the board, it goes back to the annual meeting. And the other track is to say, here's a position that we've developed based on other things that we already have as positions. And that goes to the board, then goes to local leagues for comment, questions, whatever, feedback. And if the local league responses are by and large positive, whatever that consensus sort of sense is, that there's a special meeting to approve it. Is that what we're proposing? And because there's nothing in the bylaws or the policies and procedures currently on how we adopt a position, are we free to, there's nothing that says we can't, right?
So why can't the Cyber Security Committee write a position statement and send it out to local leagues and say, do you agree with this? Along with some materials.
Along with some materials and along with this is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
I have to say that we don't have a policy right at the moment, but I've been taking notes here too, and I would like to take this opportunity to ask Barbara if you would work with me. I know you're really busy, but if you would work with me to write this policy, and we can write it up. We can have it at our next policy meeting, and then it would go from there to the board to be approved, and then we would have a policy, which would be 6 months before national. So I think it would give us sufficient time to get that done if we're going to take it to national.
Sure. I'll do it with Eugene. Sure.
Can I ask for some clarification?
Yeah.
It seems to me that I don't see it as a two-track system.
I don't either.
In my mind, and I very well could be wrong here, we encourage any league considering a study to use as many current positions as possible to put stuff together. But what we're basically doing is taking away the mandate that studies and positions are approved at annual meeting only. They can be if that timing works out, but if it doesn't, we will call a virtual meeting of the membership to approve a study or position.
And
Is that correct?
in other words, Beth, what you're saying is that if the research has been done, the feedback has occurred from the local level, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a two-track system, that as long as you do everything you need to do in order to make sure that the local leagues have the information they need, they provide us the feedback, the majority is in agreement, then we can move forward, whether it's an area that's had lots and lots of study like election security, or it's something where maybe not so much.
That's what I think.
Well, I think it still needs to be a two-track system
Okay.
because you have the traditional studies that we know nothing about, the topics, and that you really need to do a lot more background information. It's going to take longer, and the formal process that we have now is I think is really pretty good about how we do it. We just need to maybe brush up a little bit. But then there's the stuff that we know a whole bunch about, and why study it? Because
Well, I guess
just
I would
pull
have-
things together and write a position statement. So
Well, Maude,
different kinds of things going on.
But the procedure to accept a study or position is the same. It's just how the study is conducted that is the two tracks. Is that correct?
It sounds
Well,
Okay.
there's also the consensus, sending consensus questions out to local leagues, which we're
That doesn't happen
proposing.
with both tracks. I think it should.
We're sending the position, but not,
I think we
The
need to
propo-
send consensus questions.
I do
Well,
too.
well, let me say this though. With the study that we don't know anything about, yes. The one that we know quite a bit about, why cannot the committee just write a position statement and have local leagues concur?
Because I think that many of the position statements are multifaceted, and you might want to ask them, do you agree with this part? Do you agree with this part? Do you agree with this part to each league? To me, the thing that it bogs it down is having to go to, which is why I don't want the two-part thing. It's having to go to annual meetings and ask if you can do a study. I mean, I think any league that wants to can study anything that they want, or any individual that wants to can study anything they want. Most of us study all kinds of things that aren't having anything to do with our position. But if we come up with something and we want a committee to help us really research it, then we can do that. And then whether we know a whole lot about it or not, and when we say we know, somebody is weird. I just don't understand why we have to say, okay, here's an issue that we don't have a position on. Go to the whole state meeting, get their approval to study it, and then start studying. To me, it's just if we decide to study, we already know a bunch. Okay, fine, we've done the study. I mean, that is the study.
Yeah.
And we can go ahead and send out what I would like the policy to say is something to the effect of when a study, do the study, whoever is going to do it, whatever committee comes up with the idea, do a study, then present that to the board. The board then sends out the questionnaire, gets back the stuff. If it's almost time for annual meeting, do it then. If it's something that is very timely and needs to be done before the next meeting, we call an emergency meeting. And that's, to me, that's one track, but it's not.
I agree.
It doesn't. So,
Jean, I'm not sure we're getting it quite as streamlined as we might want if we did that.
Well, Jean, you're suggesting we take away the vote on each study.
I don't know why we have to have a vote to approve somebody studying something.
Well, in my mind,
Okay,
I don't,
track.
but
Yeah.
we need to know though who's studying what. And it seems to me that so that we know that La Plata and Larimer aren't doing the same damn study. And I think that the original committee should somehow tell the state and then we tell the rest of the leagues, because what if somebody else wants to join in?
That's different, Beth. I think. You're talking about a local league study.
Correct.
We're talking about a state study.
right, that we have asked them to do.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and we
Okay.
should have a mechanism that says if Larimer and Chafee are doing the same thing, they should know that that's happening so they can share information. But that's at the local level,
Right,
Correct.
and at our level, we're doing different things. It's a study, the semi-study.
Okay.
But if at annual meeting, for instance, an issue comes up, and then at the first board meeting after annual meeting, the board says, hey, this issue came up from our membership and we really need to do a study on it. They don't have to wait till the next year to vote on whether or not to do a study. The board can just say, we're going to do a study.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be a notification of a study as opposed to a vote on a study.
And then whatever form that takes, if it takes a lot of research and so forth and so on, then that's what happens. If it's something that we can pull together, then that's what happens.
Right.
And it can be approved at any time. We don't have to wait for an annual meeting. We can call a special meeting. And I think the justification for that is that we have the technology to be able to do that now.
Exactly.
And the desire, as you say, Beth, to be nimble.
Maud, you're taking notes, we've taken some notes. I want to be sure if Jean and I are writing policy that we've included a lot of discussion here and considered, how to include that.
So I have, yeah, you've been hearing me tapping away, and it's in this same folder, and I'll send a link out
Okay,
to it. It's more stream of consciousness rather
that's
than
all right.
this is what we've
Yeah.
agreed on, and I know I've missed
Yeah.
a few things. And then Barb and Jean, if you could I think maybe send what you have in mind out to the rest of
Yeah.
us. And meanwhile, I think Karen and Tony, I should convene the worker bees of the election security group to start putting together background
Yes.
of why we're doing this. And if you two would, and anybody else would be willing to look at the streamlining piece that I put together, that's a background that's in this folder. That's a background piece, and see
Yeah, I have that right here.
if that is a good start as to why we want to, why we want to adopt a position on cybersecurity. It's more why we want to streamline things, but it would, I think it could also morph into why we want to, why we want local leagues to do things. And Jean, what I'm hearing you say is that you think that a position should go out with consensus questions. So here's the position we are thinking of, and here are some questions on specific pieces in that proposed position. So
I
it's,
think that gives people more buy-in and explains more about why we're doing such and such. And again, some positions are one line. The death penalty one was we oppose the death penalty, period. I may have been on a little bit about that and had a background, but the mental health, behavioral health one was what about sentences?
Not quite. The actual position is shorter than that. That was the longer version, but I think we had it in one sentence at the end.
Okay.
A higher ed
Wow.
was,
Remember what was put in the book.
How long was higher ed?
higher ed was never one sentence. I think it turned out to be something like maybe 8 different parts or 6 different parts.
I think the behavioral health position, Jean, has a statement and then it has bullets.
Yeah, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bullets that we have in the book, and then we have the history and stuff.
Yeah, just the position at the top.
So what the focus is right now, as it should be, is what we're going to do at the state level. I'm just suggesting that you all might want to look further down the road at if we can make this work at the state level, then I think Colorado ought to suggest that the national streamline the way they do business as well.
Yeah.
Because
Are any
that's
other states,
too.
do you know if any other states are streamlining?
I don't.
Not that we know of, do we?
I'll ask next month at the executive director meeting.
Okay,
Um,
because if we get a relatively good policy put together, we could certainly offer it to national as a policy
Okay.
and a procedure. To me, this one is going to be more procedure than it is policy. It's going to be, some of the stuff is actual policy. You will do this, and some of it is, this is how to do it in a reasonable, streamlined manner.
I think the pushback we're going to get on, for instance, this one or anyone is who decides that we already know a lot about something.
Yeah, well, to me, that is the study. You have your committee that already knows about this issue, and they come together and they say, okay, here's what we know. And they have to have some documentation of what we already know.
Yeah, I think that's important to
At
send
least
out.
some literature search.
Right.
Yeah.
And then put that all together in a piece of paper or a document on electronics. And that's your study. I mean, the study only takes as long as it takes to gather the information. And if we already have the information, it doesn't take as long.
Yeah, I think good links. Yeah. Yeah, in today's world, we can do it through links.
Right.
People can read, hopefully.
Well, and the research is so much quicker now than it was maybe even when you were doing yours, Barb. I mean,
oh, yes.
You can sit down and in a few minutes get lots, probably more information than you can hardly, assimilate in a short period of time. So it's a question of dealing with a procedure that has been antiquated because of changes that we haven't,
I'm just going to say that you're absolutely right, because what we had to do was to decide who we were going to interview, well, decide the different areas that we wanted to bring in, decide who we were going to interview, decide on the questions that we would ask them, write it all up, get it to the committee. Is this what we heard? I mean, we went through.
Lots of hoops.
You didn't include, have the whole committee write different portions and then you had to rewrite them all.
Right.
Well, I'm guessing a lot of this was in person too, was it not, Barb? Or maybe
in person, or we went to an agency. One of our members is director of an agency where they had phone hookups that were visual, and we could do it that way.
So
Yeah.
this has made it a lot easier too. Maud.
We
Karen,
did not have Zoom.
Yeah.
right. Karen and Tony, you remember that Oregon's president, Becky, sent out to the state league leaders a question of how do all the rest of you adopt positions? And I'm wondering if it would be worth us, one of us reaching out to Becky and saying, what did you find out? Does anybody else have a faster method? Because Becky is clearly also frustrated by the length of time it takes.
Would you like for me to do that, Maud?
You have the maximum frustration, I think, of all of us, and you are the league president to league president. I am happy to do it also, as you know, longer routes with Becky. It is up to you.
And would you forward any results from those conversations to Barbara and I?
Sure.
Actually, to the rest of us. Yeah.
All of us, yeah.
Okay.
What's our timeline for Jean and me?
Oh, maybe a year.
I was thinking, Barb, that the next meeting for the Policy and Procedure Committee is the 2nd of December. I think we need to meet with this group before that. So I'm thinking maybe the 3rd week of November.
I will be out of town that week, so
Okay.
we are catching up for lost time, hopefully not risking, but anyway, there we go. Second week, maybe, Jean, or
Okay, 2nd week of November.
okay.
Second week of November for a draft new policy.
That this group meets on Zoom and discusses what we've done so far.
Okay. Is Friday morning, while we are all here, is Friday morning a good time for people? Tony, I know this is earlier than you'd like.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm up and about, but it's just, getting all my chores done, and I can do them after the meeting.
8:30 would be better than 8 o'clock for me. And 9 o'clock might be better for Beth because that's when the office is supposed to open.
That doesn't matter,
Um,
but thank you, Jean.
do we want to meet Friday morning, November 12th at 8:30? Oh, Beth, you've got a 9 o'clock meeting.
I will be gone by that time.
Oh, okay. How about?
I have to do it earlier.
November the 5th.
I mean, that Friday morning meeting is just a standing meeting I have with our grant writer that can be very flexible.
You're wonderful, Beth.
So November, are we looking at November 5th now?
Mm-hmm.
Jean and Barbara, can you, does that work for you?
Yeah, November 5th is fine.
Okay.
We're going to have to get our ducks in a row, Jean.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are we going with 8:30?
Somebody said that 8:30 worked better for them.
Let's see. I managed 8 o'clock today. I can manage 8 if everybody needs to.
What does everybody think?
I'm
Fine with me.
Doesn't matter to
Yeah.
me.
fine,
Okay.
fine with me.
Then it's 8.
Okay.
8 o'clock.
Just to get a stream, just to get a. So November the 5th at 8 o'clock.
Okay. And we will have, I hope, at least by the day before, a draft to look at. I will get the worker bees fired up in the meantime on the worker bees of the election security, cybersecurity committee fired up to work on a justification, a position draft that could go to locals. Not that it's going to go yet, and a background piece with more links. The position itself has some links in, draft position has some links in it. And we will share that, whatever we have by then also.
Okay. Maud, you're going to send out right away some notes.
I'm going to send a link to my notes.
Okay.
And I'm going to put this folder as a subfolder in the cybersecurity folder that Karen and Tony and the worker bees have access to, and I'll give all of you access to that whole folder so you can see more than you ever wanted to know. But I'll send these links, these notes out right now.
What's the title of that subfolder, Maud? So it'll be easy for people to find it when they do a search.
The subfolder is called position adoption.
Okay.
Okay.
I just have one devil's advocate thing to throw in. For a long time, maybe 3 years now, I think National has greatly discouraged new positions, our new studies. Is that going to be a problem?
No.
No, I'm seeing Tony say no, so we're okay.
That was my idea, so
Okay.
I can modify it if I want to.
Self-interest.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I'm always of the ask forgiveness, not permission.
It has a great
attitude,
deal.
so.
It has a great deal of validity because we have hundreds of positions, and people sit around and want to do another study instead of going out and using the position. So that's what we were trying to encourage, is to more activism.
Yeah.
Right, but this is one, I have to say, I'm of two thoughts on the whole cybersecurity position, because I really understand people wanting to increase the safety of particularly voting. But the reality is that we're never going to be safe, especially when it comes to cyber stuff. I mean, they can hack the Pentagon, they can hack every huge company in the world. There are things you can do to discourage it, but you can't ever be totally sure about anything that's on the internet.
I guess the issue is what's the trade-off? I think we live in a society where convenience has become super important to a lot of people, but with convenience, you also sacrifice safety. So is that convenience more important to you than the safety you get from going to the polls or mailing a paper ballot? And if you decide that the convenience is more important, then you have to put up with the other. As long as we all understand that and can accept it.
But our voting machines aren't connected to the internet.
That's true.
Well, if you're talking about somebody voting from home, they are.
Yes. We're talking about internet voting.
We're
So,
talking
Okay.
about returning ballots electronically.
Sure.
Right.
that's all I'm saying, is that it just has to be a recognition of those two elements, and then it's that jockeying. And some of us may be more comfortable with less security than other people are. And so then I guess maybe that's where those people that are less comfortable, they're the ones that hand deliver their ballots, and those that, and you just hope that it works out
And-
for all.
My understanding is that American servicemen vote from overseas by fax.
They do.
Yeah.
So,
I think that if it's general, we understand that somebody will call fraud.
yeah.
on these
Yeah,
issues.
and you know, Barb, that's the scariest part of all this, is that
Mhm.
even, you know, we unfortunately, what's happened is that I think the legacy of this past administration will be that if you raise enough doubt in people's minds, then, you know, then you've accomplished your mission. And until you have people that say, just a minute, and I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's within the league's power to do that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, okay. So Maud knows what she's gonna do. Jean and Barb know what they're gonna do. I'm gonna get in touch with Becky and see what she has learned from other leagues about position adoption. And if there are anything, other things that come up, why we can email back and forth. Beth?
Will this affect this year's program planning? If so, somebody needs to talk to Barb Winery.
On the cyber position, are you talking about?
No, not the cyber position, but position adoption in general. That's not going to happen. That's not going to affect this year's program planning.
I wouldn't, Tony, do you think it would? I can't imagine that it would, but.
Yeah, it will.
for this-
Well, if we haven't adopted it yet, we just do what we've always done. Is that the question?
I think we want to adopt it if we want to be able to have an impact on election security. Don't we need to, Tony?
I
Well,
want
That's
to have
what,
this to the board by January board meeting.
So
I would
check
like to
out
see it get to the
appropriate-
board by the December meeting.
Uh-huh.
yeah, we send out program planning
At the December
materials
meeting.
end of
Have it to
December.
the board by the December meeting, the board adopts it, and it's then a policy. And it's a somewhat of a change from what we've done before. What we have to do then also is change the bylaws, because the bylaws say the whole thing about the study, et cetera, and that'll have to go in the May meeting.
Okay, if the bylaws are not changed, then we
Okay.
go with what they are right now, which would mean we do program planning the way we do it.
The way it is.
So that means you're not going to be able to put the cyber security position through until after our annual meeting.
We
No,
can
because
adopt
there's
the
nothing,
Security as an emergency item and do something with it this time.
We don't have anything in the bylaws about an emergency meeting.
we
Yeah.
don't have anything in we don't have anything in bylaws or policies and procedures on how we adopt positions. We're not asking permission to do a study. We're adopting a position.
Yeah,
And there's nothing that
Okay.
says we can't adopt a position. So
yeah. Nothing that says you
I'm back
can't.
to ask forgiveness, not permission.
Well, and if we're sending it
I'm
out to
kinda thinking,
everybody,
Jake.
they have an opportunity to say, hey, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Well, let me just ask
Find
this,
out.
because if we're able to meet on the 5th and have something that we are really comfortable with and feels works, even if we need to tweak it a little bit, Beth, is it possible to put this on the November board agenda?
Absolutely.
But we have to change the bylaws, and the bylaws have to be changed by the
Well,
end.
if we have to wait to change the bylaws to the annual meeting, Tony, then excuse my French, we're screwed on this election security.
No, I don't think so. Because somebody had to say, yeah, we can do it. There's always a way.
Well, if
Oh,
it's
do it.
We'll do an end run. It's okay.
just, okay.
We'll figure it out.
Okay,
Okay, I just sent everyone a link, shared this, my scribbles, and I sent everyone a link, and I will be partly offline for a few hours. I can see email, but I can't really get into anything. So let me know if anybody has trouble getting into it, and when I get back, I will work on the other things I said I would do.
I got into it, Maud, so I'm.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're so
it's
fast,
right.
Karen.
It's right here, so I'm good too. I wonder if I could ask that Tony and Karen and Beth stay on the line just for a moment to discuss Nancy Crow's recent letter.
Here, see,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you all.
Thanks, Maud.
Thank you,
Beth, do you
Maud.
want to set up this meeting, this Zoom? Do you want me to? I don't care.
I already did when I put it into our Google Calendar, so
You're fabulous.
no, Google is.
That
Thank you.
technology,
Or I'll email you about times that we can meet.
Okay, thanks, Jean, for helping us on this.
Oh, Jean, we'll be in touch.
Yes.
Soon, like next week or this weekend? How about this weekend?
Probably, yeah.
Jean, you're welcome to stay on this line.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you a couple of my thoughts. Nancy Crow sent a recent letter, and then Shirley Jin followed up with a letter, and still making the claims that the League of Women Voters of Colorado was, and I believe Shirley's words were, corrupted in backing the amendments Y and Z. And
Fred McNulty is now lobbying the commissions. I saw that in the paper, and I thought, I bet Nancy's going to tweet about that.
I think
Go
that's
ahead.
probably the article that set the letter off, is
What?
what I'm guessing.
What's he lobbying about?
yeah, what was that again? That
He's a private citizen, and he can lobby. He wants the boundaries to be different than what the commission has said, and he's perfectly entitled to do that. They don't have to listen, and they didn't.
Right. Right. That is my conclusion too, when I looked at that. They bring up Greg Brophy, Frank McNulty, and Alan Philp, and that was in the article in the Post.
Mhm.
And I could not understand the Post article exactly, but I believe that what you're saying, Jean, is the conclusion that I reached, that they were lobbying and they weren't registered as paid lobbyists.
Oh,
That's what I understood.
Anybody else have a different take on that? I just wasn't sure how to interpret that.
You have to be a paid lobbyist to lobby?
no,
Registered.
have to be a registered.
If you're
Registered.
being paid by somebody to lobby, yes, you have to register.
Yeah.
If you're
And
just
you have to
going there
register
to
by-
give your own opinion.
But
no,
I
you
can
don't.
lobby without, okay.
you
Right.
don't do enough, Karen, that we need to worry about you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you're safe.
For some of the LACs that are down there all the time, then even as a volunteer, they need to register, but
Mhm.
Yeah.
it just
And
appears.
that's register as a volunteer
You don't
lobbyist,
have-
because we're
Right.
not
Don't have to.
representing ourselves, we're representing the league. But
So
even
I don't even understand. My inclination is not to do nothing, because we've already responded to them many times earlier on. Their information is incorrect. Nancy says that the GOP is taking over the world, which is not true. our district boundaries are leaning towards the Democrats, not the Republicans. So she doesn't even have that argument anymore. I just think it's worth no time to do anything.
Good. I'm glad to hear you say that because I did not see anything of substance in her letter or in Shirley's letter. It was the same old saws, and I didn't see anything complaining about the commission process.
Mhm.
I didn't see anything complaining about the outcome. It was more
We were duped.
fear,
And the
fear-based.
proof is the names of two people.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Say that again, Jean?
I said, I think her proof is, the only thing that she really objects to is Fred McNulty and Alan Phillips.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because they're
there
Republicans.
isn't anything else.
But Frank McNulty was on our side.
Exactly.
And he's been a great supporter of ours since then.
And
Absolutely.
he was one of the ones that kept saying, as long as it's fair.
Mhm.
Yeah, he did.
He said, if it's fair, and that's what
Yeah.
we all agreed on.
Okay, Karen, do you know that Nancy Crow was president of the league and stepped down because of Y and Z? She felt it was a Republican conspiracy.
Okay, well, you know, I've read a little bit, and it sounds to me like now, I mean, what I have heard is that some Democrats are expressing some regret that, oh my gosh, with redistricting, they're going to lose some seats. And I guess the thing that always comes up in my mind is, but is the system fair if in fact more people are voting to put a particular party candidate in and they're exercising their right to vote, then is that the way things work?
We oppose gerrymandering. If you do the district maps to allow more Democrats, then we are gerrymandering. We gerrymander Democrats as many times as the GOP. Now, the GOP is certainly gerrymandering in other states, but this is, it's built on fairness. It's built on a process. It may not be perfect. Maybe we need to do some jiggering here and there, but it's the best that human beings can do for right now.
Better than what we had in the past, which is
Yes, that's exactly right. And
my understanding.
yes, and before it was done in back rooms, and then it was
legislature right now. And
yeah.
if we didn't have Y and Z, the Democratic legislature would be gerrymandering right now to make nearly most of the state Democratic. And that would be just as wrong as doing it if the Republicans were
Absolutely.
Yes, and yet I think Nancy would be pleased about that. We have to look at her viewpoint because she believes that Republicans are very evil.
So do I, but it's fair.
But the other piece to remember is that the league looks, as Tony said, at fairness. The league says, how can everybody get in there and work this out rather than having it go to a back room? And that's what we did, and we got a lot of kudos for doing it.
The other thing I would say is that there were two groups working on how we look at competitiveness, how we measure competitiveness. It's not an easy thing. And the commissioners had to really work on that to decide how they were going to do it. And, again, there's not a perfect way to measure competitiveness. And they did a whole bunch of different things, and they came out with what they thought was the best. So, I mean, yes, people can go ahead and scream and yell about competitiveness, but, give us a better system then.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember during the writing of those, a lot of the people that were in the group thought competitiveness should be the first criteria right
Right.
after the population.
Right.
But we ended up with it being the last criteria after all the other things.
Had been satisfied.
And that is one of the reasons why it's not as competitive as it might be. But that's okay because the other things are more important when you come right down to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And community of interest is a hard thing to measure, and you have overlapping communities. of
Yep.
interest.
but
That's
it's
right.
all
You
competitiveness.
just have to do what you can do.
One other point I wanted to make is that she talks about the fact that, oh, Colorado Common Cause really regrets this, or something like that, implies that, or a person in Common Cause regrets this. Remember, and Jean and Tony are certainly were there, Common Cause didn't come in at first. And we
Even though they were
worked,
begged to over and over and over.
right, we worked and worked and worked on language. They had the opportunity then to do some tweaking. Once the tweaking had been done to their satisfaction, they came in.
Mhm.
Well, and they mostly missed all the meetings.
Oh, they did miss all the meetings.
And they didn't put a poster up with, vote yes on Y and Z in their window either.
No, they were pretty Luke.
Well, and now they're fighting this whole thing about that Hispanics are not represented well enough. They want this and they want that. Well, okay, but they weren't there.
We're never going to make everyone happy. There is
And that's a good sign. That's okay.
Yeah. So
I
anyhow,
have to say that people asked me right after they passed if I was going to apply for a position on the commission, and I said never in a million years.
Most people work so hard. I'm
Oh,
sure
God,
they're doing 24 hours a day for 3 or 4 or 5.
Maybe what the league needs to do is not a direct response, but just a general response that, and I think we talked a little bit about this at the board meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, Beth and Tony, but that the system worked. It did what we wanted it to do. Was it perfect? No, we already are aware of some areas that we need to tweak or adjust a little bit, but Y and Z worked. It made the whole process a lot fairer and provided for public input and transparency that had not been there in the past. And so
I think a letter to the editor might be really a good idea. Not
Karen,
only saying that, but also thanking the commissioners for all of their hard work.
Yeah, we already talked about
working on that.
I'm just wondering about the timing. Maybe we need to wait until the Supreme Court makes its decision about the maps.
I would agree.
I agree too.
So, but I think it's a good idea and just lauding the process and the people who work so hard.
Yeah. And citing the fairness and the transparency and the opportunity for input and the hard job that the commissioners had to do.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that this really highlights that I find interesting is that is nonpartisan as we say we are. When push comes to shove, a lot of times we really are partisan because we worry that, well, it may not go the way we thought it was going to, even though in our hearts we may realize that it's fair. If you think that now your candidate's not going to get into office. And so I think this is just a lesson that we need to guard against that, because fair is fair. That doesn't always mean it's going to fall the way we thought it would, but that doesn't mean it's fair.
And I have to be careful because Denver is, it's sort of an isolated situation. Nothing is going to change. And we know
I'm going to be in
to change. And so, I don't care where you put the lines. Denver's going to be this way.
I get to be in District 8, and I'm sure we're going to have one hell of a primary.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have fun.
Yeah.
Be a good thing.
I have to say that I have seen some national articles about redistricting and some opinion pieces, and some of the opinion pieces talk about how, yes, the Republicans are running around redistricting everything with gerrymandering, and the Democrats, because they like fairness so much, are losing out. And maybe that's so, but I think in the long run, it's a good thing, to be fair.
I think in the long run, like in Texas, I think it will even out. We lived in Texas in the late 1960s, and we lived in Houston. And we had, I'll just say this, we had a Gene McCarthy bumper sticker on when we drove down through the South, and we were kind of worried for our safety. And the country has been divided for a very long time. Gene McCarthy came to Texas, to Houston, to campaign that year, 1968. He had a little tiny gathering of people at a ranch way out. They helicoptered him in. And then George Wallace rented the Astrodome and filled it over capacity. So things are changing in Texas because Houston now is looking quite progressive.
Right. And Austin is very progressive.
Yeah,
Very progressive. San Antonio, even Dallas is.
getting better.
Yeah. Now,
Well,
if gerrymandering still occurs, they can control the state legislature, but I don't know that they're going to be able to control their senators and so on. Their national offices.
But, again, I think we just ignore it for now and then send a letter after the process is gone. It's done.
And ignore Nancy.
Ignore her. She's got something stuck in her head.
Dang. Between Nancy Crow and Linda Templin, I'm just like, wow, what a day. And it's only 9:30.
Have you forgotten the LWV mission?
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
Walk that line.
I'm gonna say goodbye to all.
Goodbye,
And
all.
I'll send you an email,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Great to see you, Barb.
Hey, nice to be on. Thank you, and good to see you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.